Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is 5 questions. More specifically, these are 5 random questions that I'm going to answer. Here recently, if you follow my homeboy, my brother from the West Coast, Baylor, he has a podcast, BTG for President. He recently did an episode on his podcast, and it was 5 random questions. And what was interesting was he got the questions from me. And what was interesting was I had these questions sitting around in a folder, and I had not answered them to bring to the podcast. And Baylor hit me up. He shot me a text. He was like, "Hey, man, if you got any ideas or any topics, shoot them over to me because I'm kind of, lost as far as what I want to talk about." And so I was like, okay, so I shot him these 5 questions, and he turned it into a podcast, and the podcast was dope. And as I was listening to it, I was like, wow, why have I never answered these questions for my own podcast? So this isn't technically a remix. This is a remake of the original, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. But yeah, I'm going to answer 5 simple random questions. We'll answer a couple of questions, take a commercial break, and then on the other side, answer a couple more before we get out of here. And these are just random questions to help you get a better understanding of the person that you're listening to. Just my opinion, my thoughts. And again, these are random questions in no particular order. Question number 1. Are you working in your chosen profession? Man, yes, I would say so. I will say this much, though. If you had told me when I graduated from South Carolina State University in 1996 that I would be working where I'm working now, I would have probably told you that you're crazy. Because here's the thing, like when I was at South Carolina State, my major was marketing, right? And in my mind, I had envisioned a career as a marketing executive, dealing with sports and brands and products and things of that nature. And I'd have this lush job, living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and I'd have a corner office in New York City overlooking the city. And that's what I pictured that my career would turn out to be. And, that's what the plan was. But plans never go as how you think they're going to go. And subsequently, I had to pivot. But here's the great thing about it was that I always say, and I've mentioned this on this podcast before, and it's worth repeating, really, I have a marketing degree, but my degree really should be hustler. I should have gotten a degree in hustling from South Carolina State University because, one of the things that my particular school and a lot of HBCUs will teach you, it'll teach you how to be resourceful and teach you how to hustle. Not meaning standing on a corner selling nickels and dimes, but being able to change and being able to adapt and then being able to make a plan, work that plan to your vision. So what I did was I just took something and ran with it. I was somebody who, I'll just give you an example. When I was at South Carolina State University, I was in the School of Business, so I had to take a management class. And I remember I had to take several management classes, but one of the management classes was managerial accounting, and I hated accounting. And I subsequently failed the class because I hated the class. And the class was on a Tuesday night, and I didn't want to go, and it was a bunch of other stuff. But I ended up taking the class over and getting a C, but I didn't do well in the class. I did well in all of my marketing. I don't think I've ever gotten anything less than a B in my marketing classes, and I didn't get a lot of Bs in my marketing classes. Got mostly A's. But, the thing about getting a degree is that you have to take other classes. So macro and microeconomics, I'd rather watch paint dry. I hope to never see that stuff again. And subsequently, I haven't. But, what it did is it taught me how to be resourceful, how to, when things aren't going the way that you want them to go, be able to dig deep within yourself and understand that there's something in you that you have to push out to make things happen. And you can't sit around and complain or worry about what the world thinks or whatever the case may be. You got to go out and go get it. And, I heard this saying a lot, particularly after I graduated. You either find a way or you make a way. And I think that's one of the things that I've been able to do in my career. So if you say chosen profession, I wouldn't say chosen because I originally thought that I would go from South Carolina State to a marketing job. And full disclosure, I don't think I can't say think. I've never held a marketing job, not marketing per se, quote unquote marketing. I've had sales jobs, but sales is a part of marketing. Um, and I've had some bad sales jobs. Shout out to Kirby Vacuum Cleaner. And shout out to the homie Uncle Dolomite from the Too Much Game podcast. He knows about those Kirby Vacuum Cleaners. Um, but yeah, no, it's so I've had jobs where I did, versions of marketing, but never had a marketing job per se. But I pivoted and got into the mortgage business and made a pretty good career for myself out of that. So, and a pretty good way of living. So, I got a couple of dollars, not a lot. I mean, I make like $5 an hour. So, but yeah, working my chosen profession. I wouldn't say chosen, but I've done what I've needed to do in this particular profession. So I think it's worked out pretty good for me. Question number 2: should individuals within a marriage have separate bank accounts in addition to a joint account? Let me say that again because I stumbled on that one. Should individuals in a marriage have a separate bank account in addition to a joint account? Um, I think that one really depends on who you ask. What's worked for me and mine is having a joint account and separate accounts as well. And for the full disclosure, for those you don't know, I'm married. At the time of this recording, we've been married 24 years. Um, and so we dated in college. And so our situation was different because we got a chance to kind of grow from, young kids to adults. Um, but what's interesting is like I remember when I was single and I had my own account, like I could tell you, like I never like had to check my bank account. Like I always knew I had money in there. And like I would get nervous anytime I had like less than $2,000. Like, wait a minute, you've got less than $2,000. Hey man, you need to tighten up. So that's how I was as a single young man in Atlanta. Um, and then, we got married and we decided to, commingle our assets and what have you. And I'm like, wait a minute, where's this debit coming from? What is this? What is this Victoria's Secret stuff? What is this? And so, it took me a minute to adjust to it. I'm not gonna lie. But we never got to a point where, we were if we were gonna buy something big or something like that, like I needed to know because if you go out and buy a car and I write the rent check, there's a chance the rent check could bounce from here to Cleveland. But that was early in our marriage. But we've pretty much been able to be on the same accord. One thing I try to do is make sure that within my account, like I always call like my account my walk around money. Like I try to make sure I got a little walk around money. So I'm not really tapping into our account because I know our account, we're going to pay bills and so forth and so on. I would recommend it. But now I will say this much. I know people who marry couples who have decided to do the other, where it's her money and his money, and like he gets his check and his check goes into his account and her check goes in her account. And maybe this one pays this bill and this one pays the other bill. And that works for some people. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it doesn't work because it definitely works for some. For me, it wasn't something that we ever tried. And what was interesting was like, I'm not even sure as far like, I think like my in-laws, I think they do the separate thing, my wife's parents. My parents divorced when I was 13, almost 14 years old. So, and I don't know that I've ever asked them, like, well, when y'all were married, did you have a joint account? I don't think I ever asked them that. So it's like, it was something like where we tried it on our own and it seemed to work for us. So I can only answer that just from my perspective as to what works for me. I can't tell you that there's a right or wrong, to be honest. Next question. Question number 3. Do you feel comfortable initiating sex? If yes, why? If no, why? Hell yeah. I mean, you should feel comfortable. Particularly if this is someone that you don't even necessarily have to be married. If this is a longtime girlfriend, a longtime boyfriend, I think if you're in tune with each other, I don't know that you necessarily should feel uncomfortable with it. I will say this much. If you plan to be in a long-term relationship, it's probably better if you're on the same page sexually. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're someone who likes sex and likes it often, you probably should be with somebody who feels the same way. Now, if you don't like it or you could kind of go without, you probably don't need to be with someone who can't go without. So, but no, I don't have a problem. It was funny because I was listening to Baylor's answer. Baylor's married too. His answer was funny too. But no, I don't have a problem initiating. But I do like, I would like to be, hey man, wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm gonna tell you. I'm not gonna put y'all in my business, but I like it, and we try to get it in as much as we can, and we get it in as much as we can, and that's all I'll say. I answered questions 1 through 3. Now I'm gonna give you 4 through 5. Question number 4: do you believe in spanking a child? What type of discipline do you believe in, i.e., timeouts, standing in the corner, or are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. If you want a podcast where culture, conversation, and life collide, where you get insightful commentary, engaging discussions, and a fresh perspective on everything, then you need to listen to the 12 Kyle Podcast. Hosted by the one and only, yours truly, 12 Kyle, a voice that you know and trust. This podcast will bring you thought-provoking moments, compelling stories, and a whole lot of fun. Whether you're a first-time listener or just tuning in, each episode promises to be something new and exciting. So sit back, relax, join 12 Kyle, myself, and my guests as we break down the world around us and give you stories that you've never heard before. From nostalgic throwbacks to everything in between, the 12 Kyle Podcast is a front row seat to this conversation. Subscribe now and never miss an episode of the 12 Kyle Podcast, where the vibe is always real and the discussion is always worth your time. Taking away privileges, et cetera, et cetera. That's a very interesting question because my wife and I, we have 4 kids. Our sons are now 25. At the time of this recording, 25. That's Dion is 25. Cameron's 22. Brandon is 18. And our daughter Skylar is 13. Now, the boys got their share of spankings. And I'll say this. They got their share of spankings because they earned every spanking that they got. They didn't just get a random spanking just because dad was mad. And I got spankings as a child too, but I got way more spankings than them. And man, I wasn't a bad kid. I mean, young 12 Kyle was a pretty good kid. But you sometimes you run afoul. When you run afoul, you got to get spanked. Um, I will say this. I think, and that's a big conversation. And it really depends on who you are and where you are generationally. Um, I don't see anything wrong with it. I will say this much: when you're spanking a child, make sure that you know what you're spanking them for. What I mean by that is you can't spank them because you're angry. You can't spank them because the Lakers lost. You can't spank them because your favorite receiver cost you, the fantasy football championship. It has to be a legitimate reason, and you have to give reasonings behind the spankings, which we never got. Me and my brother, we got spanked quite a few times. Um, but and what's funny is, and that's why I wanted to give you guys their ages, because even now, sometimes when we get together, we'll be sitting around the table eating dinner or talking or something, and they will remember some spankings that they got that I don't remember. And so it's like, yeah, I did such and such and such and such. And I'm like, man, I will say this in defense of myself. Like I said, they earn those spankings. If you was cutting up in school or you did something you weren't supposed to do and you've been warned several times, yeah, you was gonna get rocked with that belt. But it was never abusive. Um, and really the only person that really, I think Cameron probably got the most spankings. And Cameron deserved the most spank because he's the middle child. He's the one that cuts up the most. And what made his spankings worse was like you go to spank him and Cameron would be jumping around. So like you could, like there's a couple of times where I went to spank him and I swung the belt and hit myself because he moved out the way. Right. So um but yeah, these kids, they will swear up and down. If you ask my kids, they'll swear up and down like they got beaten all the time. It wasn't that frequently. Now my daughter, on the other hand, I don't even know if she's ever been spanked. Maybe once or twice, not by me. Maybe once or twice. But we said when we had her, like I was never going to be the one to spank her, because if she did something that deserved a spanking, it wasn't going to be for me, because I never wanted her to get the idea of being hit by a man was okay. Um, and I know it's different because it's your father, but still, no, I wasn't going to spank my daughter. If I had to do it all over again, it just really, I think it depends, because I would like to have not spanked them. But some kids, they don't do well with timeout. Some of you guys who are listening and watching, thank you for watching on YouTube. I appreciate it. Some of you guys who, you guys do well and your kids do well with timeout. Some kids can be okay in timeout. My kids weren't good with timeout. Some kids are really, really good if you take things away from them. If you take away their computer or their iPhone or you take away their TV privileges, or whatever the case may be, their iPad, that would drive them crazy. For me, coming up in the era that I came up in, we didn't have the internet. So punishment for me really would be preventing me from going outside, because what was happening outside, everything was happening outside. Right. So it was different for my kids because they were more inside kids than I was. But yeah, putting them on timeout, we tried that. That didn't work. It worked, that belt. Now, I wasn't one of those parents who, beat you with a, railroad track from your train set, or switch, or a cable cord. No, I wasn't doing all that. That's child abuse. But I mean, we have, particularly in the Black community, we have varying opinions about, whether or not you should spank a child. And I get both sides of it, or all sides of it, really. And I also understand the tradition of where it came from, because, there was a point in time in our history, in Black people's history, where you could literally, doing something wrong could get you killed, right? I mean, not just like anything could get you killed. And so parents were so afraid of losing a child to something like that they wanted to instill the fear of God in them. And so, probably the next worst thing is getting spanked or getting beat. Back in the day, kids got beat, like really beat. but I don't believe in beating a child to the point where you're bruising a child up and stuff like that. And like I said, if we had to do it all over again, I may not have, swung the belt. But again, I think the kids turned out okay. I think they'll kind of make the decision as to whether or not they, like I said, I don't think they got a lot of spankings. Let them tell it. They got spanked all the time, but they didn't get a lot of spanking. But again, I will say they earned it. Everybody who got a spanking, they earned it. And last but not least, how important is it for you and your partner to share religious beliefs, the same religious beliefs? I think that's very important, particularly if you're going to be in a long-term relationship or a marriage. Like, I think it's hard, not impossible, but I think it's hard to be in a marriage or in a long-term relationship if um, if you're a Catholic person and your spouse or significant other is an atheist. I mean, like if you're going to church every Sunday and then your spouse doesn't believe in God. I mean, I don't really know what to tell you. Like it could be problematic because, like, for me, I feel like I have a very close relationship with God. Um, I'm not somebody who can quote scriptures and stuff from the Bible, but I think I'm very, I'm not, I'm very religious, but I'm also very spiritual. I think I'm probably more spiritual than I am religious. Um, but I do believe in God and I do go to church from time to time. I probably definitely going to need to go a little bit more this year, which I said I would. But yeah, I mean, like, so, and I grew up in a church, and the church that I grew up in the AME church. That stands for African Methodist Episcopal Church. So when you go to my home church in Florence, South Carolina, as soon as you walk in, you see this huge mural slash um painting slash stained glass window of a black Jesus. And that's how we saw Jesus. Jesus was black. And in my religion that I grew up in the AME church. Um, my wife, I think she grew up in like Southern Baptist church. And so like when we got married, one of the biggest things that we had to do was try to find a church. Both of us were new to the city of Atlanta. Well, I had been here for a couple of years, but in my single days, I really wasn't going to church every Sunday. So I went to a couple of different churches, but I never found a church to really kind of settle on. And honestly, it took us a few years to find a church that we would both be comfortable in. And the church we go to now, we've been going there probably 17, 18 years now, and we both love it. Um, but no, I think that's the only thing I think where it would be an issue if you were a believer, or maybe your significant other's a believer, or your spouse is a believer, and you're not. Like, I think that could be problematic. But I don't necessarily think you have to force your religion on someone. Like if I believe in, if I'm a Muslim, and I read the Quran, I have certain beliefs, and where do those beliefs stop and start where yours end? So it's like, maybe I believe that, and I'm just going to use this as an example. I'm not saying all Muslims think this, but let's just say I'm a Muslim and I believe that the man is supposed to be the provider and the worker in the house, and the woman is supposed to be in the home and take care of their children, and she's not supposed to work. That could be problematic for some women. Not all, but some. I mean, some women may be like, well, no, I want to work. I want to be able to get my own now. And then there's some women like, okay, I'll do that as long as you pay for everything, that type of thing. So it's, I think it's a very slippery slope, but I do think that that's something that you have to talk about prior to committing to a long-term relationship. Because if you're not having discussions about what you think and what you believe in, then that's going to make it tougher the further along you go and the deeper you get into your relationship. In closing, like I said, I wanted to just come in and just give you 5 questions to help you get to know me a little bit more, because I deal with a lot of different topics and I talk about personal things. Some things I don't talk about personally. Religion is one of them. So you got a little religion talk. I don't talk a lot of politics either, but you'll get some of that coming soon, because in this political climate, we do need to talk about it. But yeah, wanted to give that to you, and I wanted to thank you all, and shout out to Baylor, because I don't know why I had these questions just laying around, but he killed it. So I just did what I could to follow up behind his greatness. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcast. We're on social media at 12 Kyle, at 12 Kyle podcast on all social media platforms, as well as TikTok. We also, if you want to support the podcast, you can support us financially. We have merch. We have 12 Kyle podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as coffee mugs. And you can find that in the description box if you click merch. You can also hit us up on Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. And also, we have a new baby. It is called the Rap Soul Podcast. It is a music podcast. It's where we have the intersection of discussion about artists and music from the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s when it comes to rap, hip-hop, soul, and R&B. It is the best music podcast that you've never heard, so you need to check it out. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Yeah.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.